Yeah, Y'shtola is like EDH Rex top commander and most likely to run for president in 2028. I know, huge news. This is the one video I'm gonna make to address all the Y'shtola decks, because so far, in all the other guides I've read, I haven't seen anyone kind of talk about what I consider to be the most fundamental part of this Final Fantasy Catgirl. Ears. So we all know Y'shtola rips cards when a player loses 4 life at the beginning of each end step. 4 cards per turn cycle at its maximum. And she goes super hard of Curiosity effects, so when you cast spells of mana value 3 or greater, you trigger Y'shtola, deal 2 points of damage to each opponent, rip 3 cards off of Curiosity, kinda like an Esper Vivi without the mana part. It's not hard to make this deck good. Y'shtola is a self-contained draw engine that synergizes with spells and also helps pad your life and drain your opponents all in one card. She's like the dream control commander. You used to have to work for this stuff. And there are a lot of ways you can personalize this deck. You can make her a Staxy control deck, a Stormy spells deck, or just good ol' Esper mid-range good stuff with Shieldred and Talion and whatever. But this is the one thing that all Y'shtola decks need to build for, because I bring this up every single time I see a decent enough Y'shtola deck. You have to build for inevitability. I know we talked about this in the last root video for Voltrons and how commander damage is kind of inevitable, but this is different. It has to do with control. So, Y'shtola plus spells equates to death. We know this. We've seen this and we've built around it. If given enough time and mana, Y'shtola will get there. And we can measure that pretty clearly the way we can measure how many lightning bolts it takes to click someone down from 20 to 0. 7. Even though opponents' life totals start at 40, on average they lose around 5 life from their own mana base of shocks, fetches, and painlands, and puts themselves to like 34-ish life. So in an average game, all it takes for Y'shtola to win is about 17 spells. And if you play a doubler like Delny to copy your trigger, it's about 8 to 9 spells a game. If this is the case, where all it takes is around 17 spells worth of 3 mana value spells, then the design of the deck isn't really about which assortment of 3 mana value Esper spells you play. Inevitability in Y'shtola's case is building a game plan where it actually just doesn't matter what your opponents do, because you can always answer it. Now I know this sounds like pretty standard control stuff, but we're going to be doing a much deeper dive into the concept of control relative to Y'shtola. Before we get too far, so today I'm going to be showing you a lot of cool tech from my own Y'shtola deck, and how I made it inevitable. But a really big help is using commandertemplate.com, where you can add a card to your list, then check out Scryfall tag directly within the page, select it to find other cards to fill out a theme. There's also a new feature for you to find budget versions of expensive cards that do the similar thing. So if you like finding interesting new cards to build for your deck, I highly recommend using my deck building website. Alright, let's get right back to our Catgirl. Ears. So when it comes to building an inevitable Y'shtola, there's 3 main concepts we have to think about. You want mana superiority to outpower the whole table. You want recursion to never run out of resources, and lastly, you want redundancy to force damage. So while everyone else focuses on the tech, what I'm trying to say here today is that the tech doesn't matter, it's the foundation. Ears. We'll first start with the most important concept, which is mana superiority. Now, control spells are inherently wasteful in terms of their mana cost. Outside of Source of Plowshares and a few other specific spells, most control spells are inefficient. They're just expensive spells. This is why in control decks, being able to ramp and achieve more mana than your opponent is extremely important, because it lets you negate control's inherent weakness of inefficiency. But addressing inefficiency is not the same thing as building for superiority. The concept of superiority originally came to me via playing really old Blue Farm in CDH. The power wasn't just the fact that you have 2 commanders who can rip cards, but also the fact that you played more rocks than any other deck that doesn't have 4 color in their identity. So layered with the card draw, that means you simply get to out-mana the entire table as you draw cards off your commander heuristic study, play more mana, and set your entire mana base more than your opponent, so then you can out-action your opponents when the game goes long. There's two things we need, cards and mana, which is why Rhystic Study and Smothering Tide is such a powerful combo together. And using that principle, Y'shtola can essentially do the same thing by herself, as she's a self-contained draw source and negating any disadvantage of ramping too hard in the beginning because Y'shtola can always just replenish your hand. You're essentially just never sad to have more mana, especially in a deck where you want to be playing 1 or 2 high mana value spells per turn cycle. Just saying that having more mana is pretty basic, and also it just isn't enough. If realistically per turn cycle we play 2 to 3 spells at most with our mana base, then a clever opponent will wait until we tap low to force other spells through, which is a pretty common way of overloading your control opponent in 60 card Magic. Imagine if a mono red deck played 3 1 mana threats that the control player has to answer, but each counterspell costs 2. You're overloading 6 mana's worth of spells with only 3 mana and trying to choke them out on their mana. Spicy. But drawing upon the 60 card inspiration, if you played a deck like Banterek, where Wilderness Reclamation effectively always lets you have mana on your opponent's turn, it makes it impossible for your opponents to weave through your spells. And with decks with Seedborn Muse, you're able to spend your mana each turn to draw, interact, and be ready to answer any threat at any point in the game. And back to Y'shtola, as long as you control your commander, each spell you cast at mana value 3 or greater effectively refunds itself and gives you something else to cast in that whole turn cycle. And that's why I play 15 mana rocks, because with Unwinding Clock, we get our own version of Seedborn Muse, where we now are never throttled by our mana, instead we play at much higher mana levels than our opponent. And by accumulating all this mana and giving us this many options to spend our mana, this is how we truly escalate the curiosity effects on Y'shtola to meet VV levels. Because while VV gives you mana on activation, if we're able to untap our rocks each cycle to add another spell or two, we're greatly able to amplify how many cards we get back, or also how many cards we discard with something like Helmo the Gas Lord. This is the most important piece of deck building advice to a Y'shtola deck. If you solve your mana problem, most of your other problems go away. But the other way you could lose is your opponent's actually just overwhelming all the interaction in the deck. The truth is, you will run out of interaction at some point in your deck. If you remember that the average recommended number of interaction spells is something like 12 or up to 20 in CDH with counterspells and removal, there are many universes where you simply run out of actual material in your deck to stop the table. This is something I learned myself in CDH a long time ago, where if you try and play a dedicated control deck, there are points in the game where you actually just might have spent everything and all you have is a swan song left in your deck and your opponent's win con uses creatures. And this is why I have an Elixir of Immortality to shuffle everything back from my graveyard into my library so I can keep going, thus nullifying the issue of ever running out of interaction or removal, because we can literally never run out. This is inspired by Sam Black's pre-modern Scroll Rack control deck that plays Gaia's Blessing to constantly shuffle interaction back into the deck, so the opponent eventually runs out of threats. In my list, I only play Elixir, but if you want to have 2, then Clear the Mind is also another great card to play to shuffle your graveyard and go again. Also draws you a card. So we talked about how to outplay all our opponents with the mana, make sure we never run out of stuff to do. The last part is about ending the game in this engine. And this is what makes Y'shtola truly an inevitable deck, because it's really about raising the lethality of the deck. And there are many ways to do that. You can find non-legendary clones to have extra Y'shtola triggers, you can play Delny as I mentioned earlier to double her trigger, or you might even do something like Roaming Throne if you're feeling extra spicy. You can also just include playing a combo that you draw into and just end the game and put everyone out of their misery. Most of those options, outside of including a combo, involves having more dependency on your commander, and this is the greatest weakness of the deck. Your dependency on the Catgirl to be a draw and drain engine means that if your opponent removes her before you can give her a pair of protective boots, your hand is now just a bunch of overcost removal spells. So the design really shouldn't overextend into making a great commander even greater. The entire argument is that she's just strong on her own. But finding ways to get across the finish line and bring Y'shtola's effect to the rest of the deck itself. It's truly making the deck list into Y'shtola rather than building more upon her. For the payoffs of my deck, I play Punisher cards like Painful Quandary, Polluted Bonds, Bloodchief Ascension, and Wound Reflection as ways to punish my opponents late in the game for basically taking any move to reduce the life total pressure I need to win with Y'shtola, while also playing cards like Metallurgic Summonings and Shark Typhoon to translate my spells into board presence to give another axis of pressure. You can also play cards with Extort like Blind Obedience to convert extra mana through our mana superiority to more life swing per spell you cast, kind of creating like a sort of a Stormy-like win con. Now, you personally don't have to take this approach because, as I've mentioned, there are so many different ways for you to take a Y'shtola deck to the finish line. You could even have some Catgirl sub-theme with hero tokens and pump them up with Spellslinger adjacent permanents like Runechanter's Bite. You can do whatever you want, but today's idea is to make our deck truly a controlling cat monster by finding all of its weaknesses and smoothing them out with our cards. It's a rare privilege for a commander to be so inherently strong that you have the freedom to really polish it like this. Building a Y'shtola deck is not hard. Winning with Y'shtola is also not hard. What is genuinely hard is finding something interesting to do with this commander who really wants you to do a certain thing. And by making sure that you have this incredible foundation to support it, it gives you more space to explore something different. What if this control deck is actually an expression of Final Fantasy as an MMO? What if this control deck only plays with prime numbers? There's so many things you can do. Y'shtola will just help you win. If there's a video out there or an article out there to be written, it should be another one that talks about how to build the most generic control slop in the world. But it really should be what are the weird things you can do with a commander like this. So anyways, I hope to never talk about this commander again. If you want to see my list, it's on commandertemplate.com in the video description below. You can also watch me live brew it for myself on one of the videos here. I'll link it, whatever. Anyways, thanks for watching. Yeah. Alright, this video doesn't hit for me because I only got one love in Esper, and that's my CEDH king, queen, they, them, I don't know. It's not my business. It's Zur the Enchantress. You know, if you want to build like this, whatever, Esper poser, like whatever, not my business. I don't really care for it. If you want to watch other interesting like idea deck building videos, whatever, this one over here talks about how to play Voltron by comparing it to this like critter board game called like Root or something. And this one over here, I don't know what it's going to be. Probably good, probably bad. I don't know. We'll make it random, you know, let's get spicy.